Ray County.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Welcome to Her Story, the journey to winning a seat at the table. I'm your host, Mary J. Murray, and this program is a series of conversations with inspirational women who have amazing stories to share. And stories are a tapestry of lifelong experiences and events. Let's explore the journey. My guest today is Pat Patel, and she is the Artistic Director of multicultural theater called MTSpace. And she is a graduate from the University of Waterloo. Wilfrid Laurier. Whoa, sorry about that. Wilfrid Laurier in the performing arts, particularly the music program. And she has established a career as a multidisciplinary artist. And through her role as artistic director for MTSpace, she is able to pursue her passion of centralizing racialized voices through theater. She has participated in many arts boards in order to advocate for the arts at the local and now at the national level. And she has received several awards for the work that she's been doing in the community. And most recently, she has received the Emerging Leader for Performing Arts, because Pam has demonstrated a lot of leadership in the arts world, and as not only as an actor, but as an advocate as well. And we have often seen very accomplished women in interesting roles, but that spark can emerge at any stage and at any age. And this is Pam's journey. Welcome, Pam, and thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show, Mary Jane.
So I have watched many of your videos, and the passion with which you have described the work that you do and how engaged you are in braiding communities together. But let's reflect back on some of those early years and how all of this gets started. So tell me about your beginning years.
Oh gosh, the story of my life. Well, I was born in Niagara Falls. No, I'm joking. Actually, I always had an interest in the performing arts. I loved film. I loved music from a really young age. I grew up in a household where there was always movies and music playing. And so I knew it was something that I wanted to do, not necessarily as a career, because I didn't realize I could do it as a career, but I was kind of practiced it on the side. And I have to give immense credit to my high school music teacher, actually, because in grade 9, I decided to take vocal music class, just to keep my hobby going. And he was the one who recognized, his name is Mr. Houghton. He was the one who recognized that I had this really incredible talent. And so he introduced me to this woman, Cherry Fraser, and said, you should really take private lessons with her. And in order to do that, because I grew up in a low-income household, he offered me a choral scholar position at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Kitchener, where I was able to sing in the semi-professional choir from starting in grade 10. And that was incredible learning too. And then I was able to have these one-on-one lessons with Cherry, who then asked me, so you're going to be going to school for music, right? I thought I didn't even know I could do that. And she said, yeah, you should really try to audition if that's what you want to do. And it was what I wanted to do. So, that's how I ended up at Laurier, did a Bachelor of Music, and being immersed in this community because I grew up in the Waterloo region already. I was making connections. I was able to meet someone who really, truly became my professional mentor, Majdi Blumatar, who was the founder of MTSpace. And I auditioned for him in 2008. I didn't have any theater training, but I auditioned anyway. And he cast me in a show called The Last 15 Seconds, which has continued to tour internationally and nationally. And he took me under his wing and started to bring me into the operations of the company and asked, is this something you want to do? And I really, really felt like that was when I found my calling to be not just an artistic director, but a cultural leader, and to see what kind of change I could make in the industry.
Well, it sounds like your grade 9 teacher was one of those influences, not only a mentor, but also it was one of those pivotal moments where it changed the trajectory of your life.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I always think about if I hadn't met these people, I could have been doing something completely different. And perhaps I would have been making a change in those industries too. I actually was planning to go to school for astrophysics. And that was my backup plan. And perhaps I would have, yeah, of course, if I went into that, I would have been paving a way for women because they're so underrepresented in that industry too. But I always tell myself now, as I mentor emerging cultural leaders, but also youth in the high schools too. There's an after-school program that we do. I say, whatever you do, just be creative. Even if you're going into accounting or engineering or the performing arts or writing, creative writing, I say just be creative and find creative solutions in everything that you do.
Well, I can see not only from this conversation, but from the videos that I watched in my preparation for today, was this high energy, this spark, this passion, this driving force to blend communities, particularly the settlement communities. And you have blended arts and advocacy at the same time.
Yeah, it's integral, right? I mean, especially at MTSpace, which is a company founded by newcomers and immigrants, we come from these cultures where art is so integrated in just our daily lives. It isn't siloed the way that we see it almost siloed here in our cultural practices. It's from the time that you're a baby and a child that you're practicing art, and it's just something you do. You learn to dance, or you learn to play an instrument, or you learn to sing, or you learn rhythm. And so to me, I would love to I think it's integral that we move, especially the education and health sector, in that direction where art is so integrated, because it is so connected to health and well-being. And especially in education, that's where a child is able to really develop their critical thinking.
Well, one of the things that I notice is that it's not sort of the artistic theater that we would go and see in terms of our community here in Owen Sound. What you've done is that you are looking at those racialized communities, bringing into this theater space. And maybe if you expand a little bit more about what that does, because I was so impressed with how you use the experts, agencies in your community, and brought in translators and ensured people got to the theater so that they could actually see a reflection of their own culture in your theater space. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at communities, there isn't a difference between the artist and the audiences that we're trying to reach. Like, really, what we're trying to do is create a nexus of exchange and belonging there, especially in a place like Kitchener, where there are not only newcomers every day, but also so many social service organizations. It's a real hub for that. So, on the one hand, we see all these newcomers who are professional artists. They were practicing back home. Some of them are incredible award-winning artists. Like, there's one in particular, Neda Humsi, who is an award-winning Syrian artist who came here in 1999 and, ended up working in a physiotherapy clinic doing administration. And it's like, what are you doing here? You need to be on stage. People need to see your talent. And so MTSpace was an organization that was able to bring artists like her and other newcomers who have real difficulty navigating the industry here because they're constantly being told they don't look or sound the part. Whereas here at MTSpace, we've created a process, a methodology for creating our work where artists can really bring their cultural practice and their skills. And it's really interdisciplinary theater. And while there is a director always who is acting as an outside eye and shaping the work, it's very collaborative. We don't start with a script, we arrive at a script, is what we say. And when we create this theater, we're always thinking, who is this for? It's not a homogenous audience we want to be creating work for. It's audiences who identify with the work, but also audiences who might be new to the subject matter or the content and want to raise their awareness. And so, yes, on the one hand, we want to bring in those theater goers and people who are very socially conscious. And on the other, we need to make sure that if we're putting Middle Eastern content and Arab artists on stage, that those Arab audiences are coming to see that work. And in order to do that, we do have to actually go to those spaces, to those settlement organizations, and talk to the people who are there and speak to them in their language and offer them a ride to the theater sometimes because they don't know how to navigate that, or reassure them that you don't need to dress up and wear formal attire to attend the theater anymore. But it's for everybody. It's a space that should be for everybody and for all ages and all skill levels and all backgrounds. And so we do make an additional extra effort to not only attract those audiences, but also to maintain relationships with those partners in the social service organizations. And it's not just with the intercultural work that we do, but also with trying to achieve policy change. Our work in February that we're presenting called Chelsea's Story, for example, is trying to raise awareness of the early signs or the warning signs of human trafficking, especially a show that's geared towards youth. We want to open up that conversation between youth and their families and caregivers. And so we're working with the local sexual assault support center to be able to do that, because we're the experts in creating theater, but they're the experts in talking about this stuff. So we're always trying to find partnerships.
Well, you speak very articulately about the work that you do, but you're sitting on some of these boards where you have the opportunity for advocacy. And at what point did you find your voice? And at what point do you feel that you are being heard in the larger community and in locally and now nationally? Are you feeling that voice is actually being heard?
I do in some spaces. In some spaces I don't. I will join a board where I do feel like there is an openness to doing especially the racial equity work, but also boards where I'm not the only one who is speaking about this and the only one who looks the way that I do on that board. That's really important, because if I'm going to be talking about this, well, it's pretty difficult and challenging conversations for some people, and it requires a great deal of vulnerability. I feel like I'm still finding my voice and how to talk about this, but I can say that I think some of my greatest learnings come from some of my greatest failings. The times when I felt like, oh God, like I completely failed at doing this thing. There's dumpster fires everywhere, and I don't know, I shouldn't be doing this. Which I know is a feeling that's quite common with a lot of my colleagues, and especially women, right? In a lot of industries where we feel that kind of imposter syndrome, but then it's magnified when you feel like you just totally failed at something, or you're wondering, what the heck am I doing here, and what's the point? And you have those real dips, but those were the times when I had the most incredible learning, and it allowed me to be able to be really open publicly about what we're facing here, and shifting it from being about me not achieving what I felt like I was supposed to achieve, but rather looking at, okay, well, what are the factors in our system, in our society, that caused all these barriers. I think about, for example, we have this international festival we do called Impact. And in 2019, I just felt like the friction between what we were trying to do with intercultural theater and presenting international companies and challenging artistic practice in Canada, and the venues and their rules and regulations and the technicians, it just sort of imploded in this festival, causing like this huge snowball effect that started with us having to cancel our opening night show. And after that, all these performances were delayed and late, and we had to move things around, and we were just scrambling. I was just flying by the seat of my pants, and I felt horrible because I started to get complaints from artists about, the technicians they were working with. I even had artists coming to me saying, like, I feel like you have a racist tech team. And I was like, this is the last thing I want at MTSpace. And after that festival, I just thought I should just resign. I should just step down. And it was actually my board. They're fantastic. And colleagues that I have in the sector, very close colleagues that I consider mentors in different ways, who said, just take some time, process what happened, because actually this sector needs more of us to be doing this kind of work and pushing and challenging. And it was at that point that I realized, okay, it wasn't about me. It wasn't about me not being able to do something, but let's actually scrutinize what happened here in this collaboration we were trying to do with local venues, for example, or the teams that we were putting together. Why did they have so much internal conflict? And then I was able to talk about it. And I thought, I don't want anyone else to go through this, or the other things that I've been through in my career, So after I kind of processed, taking that time was so important for me to sort of process what happened and to scrutinize it and be able to put words to it. And then I would share it. I would share it with whoever was willing to listen. And then eventually I was asked increasingly to speak, to different organizations or different groups, or do workshops and talks. And I've been quite open about these ways that we think we failed, but actually it is all part of the job of doing this work, because it can't be that theater is the end, but it's the means to an end. It's the means to trying to shift our society and raise awareness and even try to instigate systemic change within our theater industry.
Well, you've raised a lot of issues, but I'm just going to put in a quote here that you may recognize it. I always have a quote for my guests. I'm doing my best to lead compassionately towards a just and fair society. And I think that you just spoke to that in the sense that you took what you thought was a failure to learned lessons that it wasn't necessarily about you, but there were other barriers that were put up in front of you, and now you recognize those barriers are there. How are we going to next time overcome those barriers, and what kind of relationships do we need to build? Because I believe another one of your quotes is building relationships based on respect and trust. And I think that in the artistic community, you were facing some of those trust issues from the other side. And then it was a matter of rebuilding that and analyzing what went wrong. And at the same time, I think you learned a few things about yourself.
Oh, yes, for sure. And, you know, so what we did the following year, what I had already decided after I took some time to myself was, okay, screw it. Let's not use the venues. Let's build our own venues. You know, I know we're a small company, but we can do that, right? I told my team, I said, instead of putting our money into these very expensive venues, we could use that to just say pop-up tents in the park, you know, and an outdoor open air theater. Like, how cool would that be? And then COVID hit anyway, so it was great that we already had the plans for outdoor venues in place, and it was just so coincidental. But I came back and said, okay, well, this is the plan now, because this is how we'll have to adapt anyway in order to keep the festival going. So in 2021, that's what we did, and it was a demonstration of sorts, right? That sometimes it's so projected on you that you are, you know, small and under-resourced, and you don't have the funds, or you don't have what it takes to be able to do something autonomously and on your own. And we were able to demonstrate that, no, actually we can, because it's not just about money and equipment, but we had cultivated an incredible community that was ready and willing to come out and help us make this festival and all of our work happen. And I always say that was an incredible learning that I took away from 2019, that I do not take for granted, is that actually our greatest resource, no matter what industry we're in, actually, and as individuals, is our community. We really, really need that.
Well, one of the underlying messages that I've been getting from this conversation is that you have those mentors still in your head, those messages coming from your mentors, and the support from your board, which again is those messages that are propelling you forward. So I think that if there are women out there or young girls out there who are thinking about anything in their future that makes a difference to them, to follow their dreams and passions, is to have those mentors, because those mentors are going to support you through the tough times, and there will always be tough times, but it's a learning experience going forward.
Yeah, those mentors are always going to lift you up when you're so down, right? And I say that a lot to the young artists that I mentor as well, that you can never forget that the reason we're able to do what we're able to do right now is because of those that came before us, who paved the way, and we are standing on their shoulders. And so we need to continue that work, but we also need to constantly remind ourselves of that.
Well, it's a journey, and it's a process in terms of how we navigate through life. But I also wanted to know, the work that you're doing is so incredibly important in building community and making everyone in that community feel that they are included and that they are important. And those unheard or sidelined stories from other cultures who are now embedded in our communities are so important for everyone to hear. What what is it that you would like to make an impact on going forward?
Oh gosh, so many things. I mean, where do I start? But I do think a lot about what I will do after MTSpace. I mean, there's so many different options. I arrived at MTSpace by keeping my heart and my mind open, right? I mean, I wasn't planning on establishing a career in theater at all. Wasn't planning on becoming an artistic director, but I tried a lot of different things, and I would always kind of say, okay, this is something that interests me. I don't know how to do it, but I'll try. And that's kind of how I arrived where I am. And so I'm open to that when it's time for me to pass the torch in MTSpace. But something I think a lot about, because I deal with it a lot actually as an artistic director, is politics and policy. You know, I think that's really where I would like to make an impact, whether it's working at an educational institution or working in politics or working for some sort of government or funding agency. I think a lot about, until there's change at that level, well, we're going to keep facing these hurdles and barriers, because as much as we like to think that we're able to, you know, fully decolonize or dismantle systems, like, we all live in the system. We do. And we might live like as much on the fringe as possible, but even MTSpace, it does things our own way, gets government funding, and we do have to follow certain, you know, rules, and some of them I think are in place because they do make sense, and some of them are rules that will need to be broken, and I'd like to be one of the people that helps to break those rules that don't make sense anymore.
Oh, and I am absolutely sure you will be able to do that. But I think what you struck on is that it's really important for women to be sitting at those bigger tables and expressing their voice. And the other thing too is that women are worthy to be there. That is really important. And following your passions, and your passions can go in different directions. But we are coming to a close. It's amazing how fast a half hour goes. But I wanted to ask you this little pop question. In all of your scope, in all of your life, what brings you joy?
Oh gosh, my family. Yeah. Yeah. You know, to be honest, when I do have those tough times, I just really want to be the one who is nurtured and cared for. And I go to my family for that, you know, and that's part of the community, right? I just, that's also my advice to people, is where can you go to just be taken care of? Sometimes you can't be the one who is the matriarch all the time. You just need to be the child who's taken care of. And so I go to my parents and my amazing partner who supports me.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Pam, for taking the time for this conversation. I've learned a lot, and I am so grateful that you are doing the work that you do. So please join us next time on Her Story, The Journey to Winning a Seat at the Table, for another amazing story.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Are you the type who would keep going or stop? It's not easy to stop when you have an addiction. Legalizing cannabis won't stop addiction. It trivializes its consumption. Let's be vigilant. If you need help, visit portage.ca.
When an impaired driver killed my brother DJ, some people used the A word. They called it an accident, but it wasn't. An accident implies that no one was at fault. But when someone impaired by